What if there was a book that would summarize all the learnings of someone starting their own company or going through a career at top companies like Apple and Google? Well, Build is exactly that. Tony Fadell is the writer of Build, an unorthodox guide to making things worth making. We'll provide an overview of the book, the topics discussed, and some of the things we found particularly ordinary. Let's get started. When I bought the book, I was expecting to hear a story around Apple, what it's like working with Steve Jobs, and how the iPhone came to be. Instead, the book offered a manual for managing your career. While the first part focuses on the professional career aspect, the second is more focused towards founders and growing a company. The book is divided into 6 parts with different chapters in every part. Tony starts his story with the part called Build Yourself, where he discusses choosing work that matters and the value of persistence or having something interesting to share. The book also talks about how to navigate your career using a holistic approach, not just looking at the task at hand, but instead having a broader understanding of the market, the product, the customers, and so on. This will help you to move away from organizational silos, departments like HR, finance, engineering, and make sure that you're able to deliver the most value to the customer. The second part is called Build Your Career. This part discusses a few leadership tips that can help you become a better manager or expert. Something that I experienced in consulting was a lack of appraisal for management. I just thought that they had an easier job giving out orders. Looking back now, while in my startup journey, I've learned to value just how hard it is being a good manager. Managing is a whole discipline on its own, and definitely requires different skills than the one you learned in engineering, for example. A quote that I liked was: "Remember that once you become a manager, you'll stop doing the things that made you successful in the first place." That can be hard, and the examples in the book illustrate just how easy it is to fall into the traps of micromanagement. Throughout the book, Tony takes you through his journey from being a successful software engineer in General Magic, Philips, Apple, and then founding Nest Labs. While it's a bit hard to figure out his path at first, he goes into the choices he made throughout the book and reflects on his personal experience. This makes it very relatable, although it goes without saying that Tony prioritized work in life, believing the value of making things worth making and a relentless focus on the company mission. In this, his management style reminded me of Frank Slootman, the CEO of Snowflake. As an example, he shares working directly with Steve Jobs at Apple. While some might know him as an arrogant person, Tony rather describes him as a mission driven asshole. Someone who can be very direct and doesn't have time for bullshit, but someone who's also very passionate about the company's mission and changing people's life. He also illustrates the other types of assholes, like political assholes, controlling assholes, or just assholes. A mission driven asshole is actually easier to convince, as far as you have the data to make up your claim. And later in the book, he also goes into when data is most relevant in your decision making. The third part of the book is called Build Your Product. It talks about focusing on the customer experience and has some really good sections on marketing and operational frameworks. It also explained how, in the beginning, a lot of the decisions for brand new products are based on vision first and then data second. But this should change after an initial version of the product has launched. At this point in time, the data should matter more than the original vision you had in mind. If you're actually if your actual customers are telling you something, you should do best to listen and maybe adjust your strategy based on that feedback. The fourth part of the book is about the 3 generations of a product, talking about just how difficult it is to creating a product that actually makes a profit later on. More importantly, it talks about the criteria for a good idea. First, a good idea should solve a why. The product is relevant because XYZ. Second, it solves a problem that a lot of people have in their daily lives. And third, a good idea follows you around. After you research and learn how difficult it might be, you still can't stop thinking about it. Later in the book, he also talks about marketing and uses an important framework to figure out the message for a potential customer segment. When you come up with a good idea, you might want to keep in mind the concept of delayed intuition. Delayed Intuition, an idea by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, who's also author of the book Thinking Fast and Slow, is all about resisting your impulses to act fast, but instead slowing down in taking decisions. Tony also shares the best way to prepare for starting your own company and also discusses in what circumstances to raise money. The best way to prepare for starting your own company starts with, well, working at a startup. After that, you move on to work at a big company. Then you get a mentor to help you navigate it all. You go and find a co-founder to balance you out and share the load. And then you convince other people to join you on your mission. Using these steps as a guideline should help prepare you for the startup roller coaster, but I'm sure that Tony would agree that there isn't such a thing as a perfect path. We all have our own story to write. Another interesting chapter in this book is called Killing Yourself for Work and talks about work-life balance. Tony shares how when Steve Jobs took a vacation, he was constantly calling people with new ideas and things he read or thought about, just to show you what kind of person you had to be to work with him back at the time. We're coming closer to the end of this video, so stick with me. The fifth part goes further into the operational processes and roles of building a company. It starts discussing how and when to hire, the importance of marketing, and the role of a product manager. What I found most remarkable from this chapter was how Tony goes over the organizational and communication style for every phase of a typical growth company. For example, in the early days of a company, most of the people are self-managing, and the maximum number of people one human can efficiently manage is 8 to 15 employees. As the company grows, that number shrinks and a layer of management is needed. And then when the company grows even further to, let's say, 40 people, then another layer of management is needed and the communication processes also change. An all-hands meeting might not be some people sharing a lemon bar anymore, but instead will be more structured and less interactive. Another important chapter is called The Death of a Sales Culture, talking about how commission-based payments can actually be a bad thing for the company, but instead proposes some great alternatives. The final chapter, Be CEO, talks about the traits of a good CEO. For example, they hold people accountable and drive for results. They keep an eye on the long-term vision while still being eyeball deep into details. If they screw up, they admit to it and own their mistakes. They can tell the difference between an opinion and data-driven decision and act accordingly. And they realize that nothing should be theirs, even if the genesis was with them. It all has to be the team's. He continues about the role of boards and the people on it, and the process of buying and being bought. The rest of the book has some funny anecdotes of the perks and strategies at Google, which I'm sure they won't be all too happy about. Tony Fadell concludes the book by stating that there are two things that really matter: what you build and who you build it with. Overall, I found the book a great read with a lot of interesting insights. As a small critic, the personal experiences were sometimes a bit hard to follow, especially the companies where Tony was active at that point in time. This might also be a book focused on aspiring founders, but they will have to go through some generic career advice at first. Build has been truly helpful in providing guidance through my own startup journey, while also being just a very fun book to read. Thank you for watching this video, and let me know what you thought of Build in the comments below.